Ken Dryden's passing this weekend reminds us how Boston once undervalued a young talent and watched Montreal build a dynasty. Today, with a roster full of waiver-exempt kids and veteran stopgaps, the Bruins face the same kind of choice, and they can't afford to repeat the mistakes of the past.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Monday, September 8th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins your first listen every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on today's episode, we are going to dive into the kids versus veterans depth war and why Boston risks leaving wins, maybe even cups, maybe that's a stretch, on the table if they lean too heavily on vets. Then we'll look at Don Sweeney's roster philosophy, grit over skill, safer bets over upside. If that sounds familiar, it should, because finally today's Bruin of the day is not someone you typically think of when it comes to the black and gold. Ken Dryden, drafted by the Bruins, traded away for nothing, a symbol of what happens when you undervalue young talent. And of course, we will remember his legacy here in light of his passing over the weekend. Again, thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Before we get into it, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. That's on Blue Sky, X, Instagram, Threads, TikTok. You can find me, my hockey thoughts, and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I've been covering this team and the NHL for various outlets for circa 20 years. So one of the big storylines for the Boston Bruins this upcoming season is kind of the depth war on this roster and in the lineup. If Marco Sturm leans veterans over youth, Boston risks repeating history and perhaps leaving points, playoff spots, maybe even cups if everything went perfectly according to plan on the table. Now again, the Bruins missed the playoffs last year, dead last in the East, and that doesn't necessarily get fixed by doubling down on older, safer veterans. But that's kind of exactly what Don Sweeney did in free agency. A lot of people are critical of Don Sweeney, and for very good reason. His drafting record, spotty. His trade record, I believe, is a strength on his resume. Many of the trades that he's made, especially, dating back to this past trade deadline, even the Viktor Arvidsson trade, those are pretty good. But when it comes to July 1, he's got a very spotty track record that includes David Backes, the triumvirate a few years ago, Nick Foligno, Thomas Nosek, Eric Haula. Those all kind of worked out in the end. But when it comes to free agency, Don Sweeney isn't really kind of a master class GM at that part of the thing. Matt Beleskey is the other big contract that did not pan out at all. And this season coming in, we have roster spots seemingly given to Tanner Jeannot, who got a big 5-year contract that is widely seen as one of the worst contract signings of this past summer. They added Michael Eyssimont, Sean Kuraly. These are guys who compete hard, but whose ceilings are already set. And it's the same with Viktor Arvidsson to a certain degree. Now, you wanted to bring him in because of his scoring capabilities and to have some more experience in the top six. The top six is pretty much set, I believe, with Morgan Geekie, Elias Lindholm, David Pastrnak, and then Pavel Zacha, Casey Middlestat, maybe swapping in and out of the left wing and center positions on the second line, and Arvidsson on the right wing. But after that, there's a real battle for who's going to play in the bottom six. You have your Jeannots, your Esymonts, your Kuralys, with some younger guys like Fraser Minten, Matt Poitras, Fabian Lysell, Mate Blumel, who was signed this past summer as well, Alex Steves, guys who scored regularly and more often than anybody last year in the AHL. Fraser Minten, Fabian Lysell, Poitras, these are guys that should be given a chance to play in the regular lineup this season, but because of the nature of their contracts, they are more easily variable. They're more easily reassignable than the other guys who are on one-way contracts. Poitras is waiver exempt, as is Fabian Lysell, Stanislav Melis, Fraser Minten. Those are all guys who can be sent to Providence without having to go through waivers. Other guys that were signed like Kuraly, Esymont, and some other players like Marat Husnudinov, John Beecher, Alex Steves. These are all guys who would have to go through waivers in order to be sent to the AHL. Same with Blumel. So, yeah, they signed some guys with upside in Steves and Blumel, but that just forces out the younger guys that they already had who have shown that they deserve some consideration. I haven't even mentioned Georgi Merkulov yet, who is not waiver exempt, I should add. So in order to be assigned to Providence, any of those guys will have to go through waivers, and you risk losing them. Some guys that's, easier to swallow than others. I don't know if you want to lose Steves or Blumel on waivers right out of the gate before they even skate a regular season game in the organization. Esymont, Kuraly, those are guys that you should be able to put on waivers and would sneak through, but that's provided you're going to give those guys, younger guys, a chance. What makes Minten, Lysell, Poitras easy cuts from the NHL team is the fact that they can be reassigned to Providence without risk. Even if they're better bets or have higher upside than some veterans, it's all about the nature of their contracts and kind of that asset management. So if Sturm goes safe with vets, kids get buried, perhaps their long-term development stalls. Way back in 1964, the Bruins didn't seem to see Ken Dryden's potential. They moved him for nothing. Montreal built a dynasty, and Boston left multiple cups on the table. If the Bruins don't learn from that, undervalue their young core once again, they're setting themselves up for another wasted year. And this is particularly relevant in net this year. The Bruins have a younger guy in Michael DiPietro. They have an older vet in Joonas Korpisalo to fight for the backup role when behind Jeremy Swayman. You might feel as though the veteran will have the upper hand. He's 5 years older, more experience, making $3 million. But the easiest decision here is to not try to put Michael DiPietro through waivers because he will be scooped up. There's absolutely zero question about it. You've already seen a bunch of articles from other markets where they're coveting a guy like Michael DiPietro. The Edmonton Oilers would be all over that if he were to be placed on waivers. So that's perfect prime situation there where they need to prioritize the youth over not trying to hurt a veteran's feelings or bury him and potentially alienate him, because prioritizing DiPietro over Korpisalo is the easiest call in the world. This isn't just about who makes the roster, though. It's about philosophy, right? Don Sweeney's approach to building this team keeps putting veterans ahead of skill. And let's talk about why that's holding Boston back here as the podcast continues. The NFL season has arrived, and FanDuel is making sure you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel is so easy to use. They have player props. You can build a same-game parlay, even jump in live as the action unfolds. Makes every game even that much more exciting. Although I don't know how you could make last night's Bills-Ravens game more exciting, but you could have by using FanDuel at the same time. It's quick, easy, the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays, Thursdays, Monday nights as well. So if you're ready to play, download the app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the FanDuel app. Thanks again for making Locked On Bruins part of your day. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube so that you never miss a thing. Now, Don Sweeney this past July had some money to spend, and he kind of overvalued some safe bets and repeated some mistakes that he's made in the past. He's got this grit first veteran approach where he, again, prioritized Tanner Jeannot, Michael Eyssimont, Sean Kuraly, even Viktor Arvidsson. These are four vets who are four safe, known quantities. Yes, he added Blumel, Steves, who are skill players who led the AHL in scoring last year, but no real proven NHL track records. And it also potentially blocked the development and promotion of guys like Fraser Minten, Matt Patra, Fabian Lysell. And their waiver exemptions make them the easiest cuts. So don't be surprised if a couple or all three of those guys begin the season in the AHL. And this isn't new. Boston has a history of questionable grit first signings that you would have hoped that Sweeney would have learned from. In his first summer as GM, he signed Matt Beleskey to a 5-year, $19 million deal after one good year in Anaheim. Never topped 15 goals in Boston, bought out halfway through his contract. The next summer, David Backes, 5 years, $30 million. Fantastic leader, but the game was speeding up while his foot speed declined and the contract became an albatross. Boston had to attach a first-round pick just to move it. Side note on Backes, I will forever argue that he should have been in the lineup for Game 7 against the St. Louis Blues. All due respect to Carson Kuhlman, who had scored a big goal in Game 6 to get them there, but you don't bench a guy who captained the team you're playing against in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. I believe he would have gone out there and put out the effort of his life. Even if he didn't score, you know he's going to be hitting, getting under other players' skin. He should have been in that lineup. That was a big mistake by Bruce Cassidy. Anyways, those deals ate up cap space and blocked younger players from opportunities. And that's exactly the same risk with this year's quote-unquote character ads. Sweeney's modus operandi is to prioritize compete and physicality, even if it comes at the cost of upside. that philosophy has a track record and it hasn't aged well. I mean, just think to a couple years ago when they were going through this transition. They brought in James Van Riemsdyk and Milan Lucic, who clearly was at the end of his career, even though the St. Louis Blues have brought him in on a PTO. Off ice issues aside, he was injured, couldn't hang, and it was a cheap deal, but still, it's like, why? What's the point? They don't need that kind of player right now. Around the league, elite teams lean into skill. Florida, Edmonton, Colorado. They add grit to supplement, not to define. Boston's still kind of doing the opposite. You have these younger players. Yeah, they're unproven, but they have higher upside, certainly, than Sean Kuraly, Michael Eyssimont, and Tanner Jeannot. You already have Mark Kastelik there to play that role. You already have guys who are responsible defensively, who can throw the body. You need some scoring in this lineup. Right now, Daily Faceoff has a third line of Jeannot with Minten and Blumel. I mean, that wouldn't be bad. Fourth line, Beecher, Kuraly, Eyssimont. Now, the thing is, of course, you don't want Fabian Lysell up playing a fourth line role, a checking role for this team. At worst, he should be on the third line in scoring role with some defensively responsible players. So perhaps Jeannot, Minten, Lysell. That's the trick, right? You don't want to lean too heavily on kids and risk exposing them or exposing the team, but you also have to score. You need some skill on the lineup in order to succeed. I expect the fourth line to be like Kuraly, Beecher, Kastelik. Third line of Jeannot, Minten, Poitras, Blumel, Lysell. So there will be some opportunities there, but not for everyone. And the Bruins run the risk of burying some kids and putting potential goals and offensive opportunities aside in the name of physicality, defensive responsibility, which might not make them as fun to watch. They might be able to eke out some 1-goal games, but long term, what is best for these kids who have, Matt Poitras played in the NHL a couple years ago. He was good enough then. He's added some pounds. I think he should be ready to make the jump. Same with Fraser Minten. Same with Fabian Lysell, who got better and better as his games with the Bruins went on late last season. Yes, it was garbage time, but still NHL games. Now, the Bruins once gave away a future Hall of Famer because they didn't value his upside, and that mistake cost them cups in the 1970s. The modern version is filling your roster with veterans who are blocking skilled youth from reaching their potential. And until Boston learns from history, Beleskey, Backes, back in 2015, 2016, Tanner Jeannot here in 2025, Sweeney's grit first philosophy could keep capping their ceiling. And speaking of Dryden, he's actually today's Bruin of the day. Drafted by Boston, traded to Montreal, and the ultimate cautionary tale. We'll discuss Ken Dryden here as the podcast continues. The hockey world was hit by some very sad news over the weekend as Ken Dryden passed away at age 78. A Hall of Fame goalie who won the Stanley Cup 6 times with the Montreal Canadiens. He was also an author, a lawyer, Leafs president for a bit, and a member of parliament up here in Canada. He passed away after a battle with cancer, and just an immense loss for the hockey world, for the Montreal Canadiens organization, for Canada even. And Commissioner Gary Bettman said from the moment Dryden joined the Canadiens as a 23-year-old rookie in 1971, he made an immediate impact on the NHL, the Canadiens franchise, and the goaltending position. After playing in only 6 regular season games during that first year, he proceeded to lead his team to a Stanley Cup while winning the Conn Smythe as the playoffs' most valuable player. Incomprehensible to believe that he accomplished all that the year prior to winning the Calder as the league's best rookie in 1971-72. It was only a harbinger of what was to come, Bettman added. He would lead the Canadiens in only 8 years to 6 Stanley Cups, 5 Vezina trophies, 4 consecutive, and named to the league's greatest 100. Just an absolute dominant run in the 1970s. Now, I probably knew this, but I was reminded of it over the weekend that Dryden was selected by the Boston Bruins in the 3rd round of the 1964 NHL draft. But just a couple weeks later, the Bruins traded his rights to the Montreal Canadiens. He put hockey on hold for a bit while pursuing a college degree at Cornell University rather than attending Canadiens training camp. It's kind of an unusual decision. He was amazing at Cornell and then joined the Canadiens in 1970. And of course, went on to win multiple Stanley Cups with that team. He was traded for Guy Allen and Paul Reed, neither of whom played a single game in the NHL. And again, Dryden's resume: 6 cups, a Conn Smythe, a Calder, 5 Vezinas, Hockey Hall of Fame, .922 save percentage, albeit in kind of an era of lower scoring. Now, just imagine him as a member of the Boston Bruins. Yes, Boston won cups in 1970 and 1972 with Jerry Cheevers, but they lost in 74 to Philadelphia and 77 to Montreal, a team that was backstopped by Dryden himself. Imagine a club with Bobby Orr, Phil Esposito, Johnny Busick, Wayne Cashman, and Ken Dryden. The Bruins could have easily added 2 to 3 more cups in the 1970s. Undervaluing young skill cost Boston a dynasty once. I'm not saying it's going to happen to that extent again, but undervaluing Fraser Minten, Matt Poitras, Fabian Lysell, Mason Lohrei, they risk wasting another era of their great players now in David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy. So I'm not comparing Dryden to the Bruins' young guys now, but they need to maximize those primes: Pastrnak, McAvoy, Jeremy Swayman, and not always take the safe route. Dryden's passing, like rivalries aside, it's a huge loss to hockey, to the NHL, to, every team was out there paying their respects, and for good reason. It's also a reminder that the Bruins once let greatness slip away and left multiple cups on the table. They can't afford to make the same mistakes with their current crop of young players and their core players. At the end of the day, the Boston Bruins' history is filled with decisions that shaped the trajectory of the franchise for better and for worse. You have Dryden being traded to the Canadiens on one hand, the Bruins getting Tuukka Rask from the Toronto Maple Leafs on the other, or Cam Neely from the Vancouver Canucks. Ken Dryden's passing is a stark reminder of a pretty big misstep, undervaluing a young player's potential, watching him turn into a Hall of Fame level goalie somewhere else, and most painfully in Montreal. That mistake quite literally cost the Bruins championships, and it underscores the importance of the choices Don Sweeney and Marco Sturm are making right now. As this season begins, the question is simple. Will the Bruins lean on stopgap veterans, or will they give the next generation of talent the ice time and opportunity they need and deserve? Because the lesson of Dryden, Beleskey, Backes, countless other safe bets is clear. When the Bruins play it safe, they often lose. If this is truly a redemption year, it has to start with trusting at least some of these kids and building more than just today. Do you agree that the kids need to play? Do you want to see Sean Kuraly, Michael Eyssimont, Tanner Jeannot in the lineup all 82 games? Hit me up on X, Instagram at LockedNHLBruins or at ENC McLaren. Also comment on the YouTube channel. Let me know what you think. And yeah, I'd always love to hear from Locked On Boston Bruins listeners. I'm so thankful for the everydayers who tune in and schedule their days around, starting with a Locked On Boston Bruins episode with their morning coffee. It very much means a lot. And if you're not already on board, please do hit that subscribe button so that you never miss a thing. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL show, bringing you daily league-wide stories that matter most with local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hope you all had a great weekend. Played a softball tournament up here. We did not advance to the final, but we did finish 2-1 in the round robin. Took a grounder off my foot, which is pretty sore today. Yesterday, I assembled the desk for our middle boy. Took him to his first basketball scrimmage of the season. Feeling cool out there. Football's back. Hockey's just around the corner. And we're bringing you everything you need to know about the Boston Bruins on a daily basis here on the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. Have a great Monday, and we'll talk to you here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.